Hi, everybody. It's John Olczyk here, security researcher and analyst in residence at theCUBE and SiliconANGLE, and this is my podcast, The Cybersecurity Bridge. Thanks for listening. So if you're new to the Cybersecurity Bridge, each episode is broken out into 3 parts. The first part, we talk about the present of a particular area of cybersecurity. The second part, we talk about the future of that area. And the third is the Cybersecurity Bridge section, where we bring it all together and we talk about how we get from the present to the future. Are there impediments? Are there drivers? And we'll do that today and talk about endpoint security and EDR with my guest, Eric Skinner. So Eric, please introduce yourself to our audience.
Hi there, John. Thanks for having me. So I am with Trend Micro. I work on our strategy in general across the various segments that we do business in. And I've been at Trend now for about 13 years, but I've been in cybersecurity since 1998. So I've seen some stuff.
You got me beat. I started full-time in 2003, so that's an interesting conversation that will play into what we're doing. But before we get into our topic, are you ready to play cybersecurity trivia?
I knew this was coming. Yes.
You did? Okay.
I might lose, but I'm ready.
Well, no, you never know. So Eric is a proud Canadian citizen.
It's true.
And so this has some Canadian implications. So there is a privacy regulation called PIPEDA.
Yes.
Or stands for the Personal Information Protection and Electronics Documents Act. And the question is, when was this first implemented? Was it 2000, 2001, or 2002?
Those are all so close together, I'm just going to have to guess. I'm going to say 2001.
You are correct.
Well, that was luck.
And you are only the second.
Zone, but yeah.
You know, kind of right down the middle, but you're only the second guest I've ever had who got it right. And it's a little bit tricky because in 2000 there was a royal assent, which I assume means it was ratified. And then in 2001 it was implemented, but for only financial services, telecom, and airlines. And then 2002 for personal health. So you kind of could have been right on any one of those, but
you're right.
Picked the right one anyway.
So the law, yeah, I get it. Yeah. Well, I'm glad I'm only your second winner. That's cool.
You're in great company there. So let's talk about the present of endpoint security and EDR, and just a broad question: how would you characterize the present of EDR?
It's evolving rapidly. I mean, this is one of the reasons that I love the cybersecurity space, is that it's just constantly changing. It's constantly innovating. Nothing sits still. So I think EDR is going through a lot of changes and certainly getting connected up to some important things to make it better. So yeah, still a very exciting time to be participating in that market. And still a super, super important technology. We, as much as it's important to look at other areas of the customer environment, EDR is critically important.
Yeah, so I'm gonna take advantage of your experience here, and especially coming from Trend, who's been around in this market. So if you kind of look back into the present day, what were the critical milestones you think in history of endpoint security, EDR, AV?
Without making this super long, I think one of the important shifts that happened long before I got to Trend, there was a shift to expand a little beyond sort of the 1980s, 1990s signature-based approaches. And a bunch of vendors were experimenting with ways to deal with how attackers were doing a little polymorphism. They were modifying their executables a little bit, and they were making it easy to get around signature-based AV back then. So there was some evolution in the late 90s, early 2000s in that area. But one of the important shifts certainly was looking at behaviors rather than looking at files. you can only get so far by trying to assess a file, whether it's with signatures or machine learning or all the techniques that have been done over the years. Behaviors kicked in some ways as early as around 2001, 2002, around the same time as that Canadian law. But EDR came along as a concept in around 2012, 2013 as an important approach that got the whole industry away from really obsessing on recognizing the nature of files and looking more at behaviors. And I think another important shift happened, I'm going to say around 6 years ago, when XDR came along, and when a few vendors, Trend was one of the early ones, along with Palo, said, hey, what if we took this same approach to looking at behaviors on the endpoint, and we looked at behaviors elsewhere on the network and the email environment and so on, and pooled all of that together? That's been one of the really big important shifts. And then, of course, more recently, AI really kicking into high gear with respect to powering not only the attackers and speeding them up, but also powering detection in some new ways, and upskilling the people who are trying to deal with alerts.
Well, I was certainly going to go into AI, so I'm glad you mentioned it.
We can't have a podcast in 2025 without talking about AI, so yeah.
We can't have a beer in 2025 without talking about AI.
True.
But, I mean, I look at Cylance and some of the pioneering things they did a few years ago. And so where are we today? What's under the covers with AI that our audience should really know about?
Well, so back in the era of Cylance, and certainly there were other vendors doing various other things, the technology was machine learning primarily, and machine learning was being applied to try to deal with the fact that the files didn't always look the same. So it's like, hey, can we recognize that this is malicious without recognizing the file itself? And machine learning was pretty good at that. There was a little bit of marketing hype at the time that it was 100% effective and you didn't need any other techniques, and that wasn't true. But it was certainly a boost, continues to be a boost. That technology is still in modern EDR products. The big shift now is the use of generative AI and the rise of agentic AI, and maybe we'll talk about agentic a little bit in the future, but where first of all, the AI is able to help better clarify for a SOC analyst or somebody who's in IT, who's dealing with alerts coming out of their EDR, to better help them understand what's going on, to better help them explain PowerShell scripts that the system thinks is malicious, and all these kinds of explanations that can be done proactively now. But also a lot of use of Gen AI at Trend Micro, certainly at other vendors as well, with respect to supplementing detection and finding new ways to look for malicious activity, leveraging Gen AI to basically extend the reach and to speed up the detections. So really a complete sort of generational change from the machine learning stuff that was going on a while back to Gen AI now.
I'm glad you mentioned Gen AI from an analyst or an administrative perspective, because that is where I'm seeing a lot. And so it's not necessarily on the detection end. It's not, but yeah, it's both.
Yeah.
Yeah. But, one thing I wanted to ask, though, is we are seeing some instances, maybe not a pattern, maybe, and you would know better than I, but of malicious actors turning off EDR agents. So
yeah,
you see that as a pattern, and what do you do to as a countermeasure to that?
Oh, so first of all, EDR evasion and EDR disabling is widespread. You can buy a book about it on Amazon to learn how to do it, although it's presumably out of date because it's a year or two old. So that is absolutely one of the battlefronts that every vendor deals with. And A variety of things going on there. First of all, EDR is so widespread now that attackers have to target it. Before, what they would do is they would just try to find endpoints that didn't have EDR, and they were everywhere, or find companies that didn't have EDR, and those were easy targets. Now that most companies have EDR, the attackers have to find ways around it. So either they're trying to hide, they're trying to lay low, they're trying to live off the land. That is increasingly challenging with modern EDR, but they are also trying to disable the EDR, uninstall it. And typically how that's happening is they're getting a foothold somewhere else in the environment, for example, where there's a blind spot and there's no EDR. They're elevating privilege, or they're elevating privilege fast enough on an EDR device that maybe the SOC team doesn't have time to deal with it, and then using admin credentials, disabling any EDR. So, Microsoft, CrowdStrike, Trend, whoever. And every vendor is working hard to implement countermeasures, make sure that they can, first of all, spot those blind spots, but also spot the early stages of those privilege escalations, and also spot the disabling steps, because there's a wide range of TTPs related to EDR disabling.
And really what you're characterizing is just the typical attack pattern of, let me get in the way I can, let me move laterally, escalate privileges, and then disable what I need to, whether that's turning off logging or turning off an EDR agent. So
yeah.
Nothing new there.
Yeah, I mean, the specific techniques are always evolving, and the specific measures are always evolving, but that's the general plan. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and that's an important point that it's worth making again, that it's not the new shiny AI-driven attack. It's just the attackers looking for the lazy user or the lack of hygiene or something like that.
Yeah, and for me, it's not sort of this black and white thing about, wow, either the attack is AI or it's not AI. It's much more subtle and much more pervasive, right? Any attacker out there is no doubt using AI to upskill and to accelerate. So a dumb attacker gets a little smarter, and a smart attacker gets a lot smarter, because they can accelerate their attacks and innovate faster. Does that mean it's a revolutionary, brand new kind of attack? No, but it's speeding up what they would normally have done without AI.
Yes, and hopefully, and I say hopefully, the defender is doing the same. They're using AI to get smarter on the defensive side. But let's go to the future. And I'll just, the future of AI, the future of endpoint security, EDR. Let's look 2-3 years down the line. You mentioned agentic AI. What do you see there?
Well, I think a lot of organizations are still struggling with actioning the alerts that they get from EDR systems, or more importantly, XDR systems these days. There's a lot of good, well, let's touch on XDR maybe in a minute, but there's a lot of challenges dealing with prioritization of alerts, figuring out the appropriate mitigations, implementing the correct playbooks, automations, et cetera. And agentic AI is certainly helping with that, with respect to proactively stepping in and picking up from where the EDR has traditionally left off, and up-leveling the kind of advice and the automation that's available to SOC analysts and others in the organization. This is still early days for sure. There's a lot of innovation happening in every EDR company, but I think we're going to see some amazing things in the coming year, and certainly beyond that.
Is there a particular action that you hear users talking about often? So you speak to 10 users, and 7 out of 10 say, if agentic AI could do this for me, that would be a big force multiplier. Have you heard anything like that?
I mean, there's a few things. They always want the prioritization to be better. And there's a number of things that are helping with that, not just AI, but AI is certainly helping. And we can touch on that. they also want automation, and it's this trade-off for everybody. There's a nervousness about enabling full automation when you're dealing with potential threat activity, but there is tons of interest in having the course of action laid out very crisply, proposed in detail, implemented automatically for somebody to approve, so that you shrink that time to response substantially. So a lot of interest there. Everybody still hopes, yeah, okay, we're going to turn on more and more full automation. That's going to take a little time for everybody's comfort level, no matter whose product they're using.
And I assume that what people are asking for or demanding is, give me some kind of audit trail or timeline. Before you ask me to take action, I want to know why you came to the decision you did. Is that accurate?
Absolutely, right? And this is where AI can certainly help, because I think a lot of EDR consoles out there have presented a lot of technical information, but when you're short-staffed, when you're trying to deal with something in the middle of the night, there's always been a challenge around making sure that you're really understanding what's going on, and AI is helping provide that context and provide clarity.
Now, I know Trend Micro quite well, and we've worked together for years. And I know Trend has great threat intelligence. You've got the EDR, you've got XDR, like we've talked about. There's a lot of other things that you do. When do we get, in the future, thinking AI, when do we get to predictive? When do we understand, here's a new threat that's evolving, so I should do X, Y, and Z, I'm going to talk Canadian here, to address that proactively?
Well, I would say now, and really this touches on something that's super important that's been coming up alongside EDR and XDR that really, really helps, which is exposure management. These things fit together so incredibly well, because so many companies are realizing, wow, attackers moving faster with AI. We got to react faster. We have to get proactive. So a proactive security approach is about figuring out where your problems are and then prioritizing them. And a big part of what we're doing there is prediction. So we're saying, hey, let's look at the whole asset graph, all the understanding of misconfigs and vulnerabilities, and all of our understanding of threat intel, and leveraging AI, then predicting what is the attacker most likely to do, so that you can then prioritize mitigation in those places. It's actually less about detection and more about just get ready, because it's most likely the attackers
or about preventing
these things. Yeah.
Okay, so
mitigating proactively, right?
Mitigating risk.
Yeah, if you have high confidence the attacker is going to do something, then why not?
We were doing that back in '98, right?
Well,
trying to.
No, yeah, things have come a long, long way. Yeah.
Yes. And we are talking about the future. So here's another question for you in the future. I look at the future, and I told you before we got on air here, I'm doing a deep dive on healthcare.
Yeah.
There are going to be a lot of devices, mobile devices, edge devices, et cetera, without EDR agents.
Correct.
And in fact, I think that population's probably, at least in healthcare, is going to increase faster than those that you can put EDR agents on.
Manufacturing, a number of other places, yeah.
Exactly. So what happens there?
Well, this is one of the many reasons that XDR became a useful approach a number of years ago. And it's because you're not going to get EDR coverage everywhere. There are devices that you cannot install EDR on because they're a smart TV, they're a printer, they're a healthcare device, they're something ancient that can't be replaced. So picking up other types of telemetry is super, super important, whether it's network detection telemetry, maybe it's something from cloud assets where people are often shifting away to sort of cloud native approaches and instead of deploying assets. Maybe it's IoT devices and you're leveraging different kinds of telemetry there. Maybe it's just your vulnerability management detections, pulling all of that together in an EDR style approach where you say, okay, what's all the activity, whether it's EDR or not, and then focusing a lot of the detection capability, AI powered and rules based and otherwise, at the XDR layer instead of being down in the EDR silo. Because then you have breadth of visibility, right? You can see activity that's moving from a non-EDR device to another non-EDR device to an EDR device, and you get a bigger picture, so you're going to plan better mitigation. And that approach really is substantially better than a siloed approach.
Yeah, so we're certainly seeing that at Trend and with other vendors, but we're also seeing it on the user side. But that begs another question. We're straying a little bit away from EDR, but I think it's all relevant.
Well, the lines are getting blurry, right?
Exactly. I mean, EDR, XDR, just enterprise security. Where does services come into play? Because we just saw, was it this week? Time flies, but Zscaler buying Red Canary. So that's a traditional SASE company buying. So what's your read on the services angle?
Services are such a huge boost to so many organizations now, and it's specifically I'm talking about MDR and MSSP services, because so many companies don't have the resources. It's great if you're a bank and you have 40 people in your SOC, but the typical enterprise out there doesn't have those resources. And so, whether it's middle of the night issues or just complexity, and giving a team a boost when they're understaffed or underskilled, as they're coming up to speed, services have been tremendous. And we see that in our own customer base, and I'm 100% sure it's the same elsewhere, that customers who are using some kind of MDR MSSP service from us or from a third party, they do better with respect to incidents rather than companies that are trying to do this on their own. And it's the same thing. It's the same thing everywhere. Having that extra boost, it's cost effective versus trying to staff your team to the level that's required 24/7.
Yes, I totally agree. And it's, to some extent, it's about customer success. And that's an area that I know Trend 10, 15 years ago, it was assigning a person to make sure you're using the technology correctly. Do you see AI performing that function? So kind of reviewing your configurations and saying, you really need to turn this on, you're not using this, because, I mean, there's a lot of functionality in Trend software and Trend systems that people don't know that's there, or they don't use effectively. So will AI kind of bridge that gap?
Short answer is yes, it's happening already. I mean, I think one of the paths we've been on from quite a long time ago, where we had siloed capabilities in various areas of the environment, endpoint, network, and so on, we've shifted to a platform approach, as many of our competitors have. We've also added exposure management capability, as lots of people in the market are doing. It's like, hey, try to get a sense of what's going on in your environment, find the vulnerabilities, the misconfigurations, the settings that could be better, and automating that and prioritizing that. And again, that brings us back to the prediction point earlier. What are the attackers going to do? Okay, go fix these 3 things. So that's already being done completely automated with an AI assist. That doesn't mean all our customer support people are gone. It just means that we're focusing on more exceptional situations, but really trying to get customers in good shape, whether they're using Trend correctly or not, whether they're using other products in their environment or not. That's the power of exposure management as an approach.
Got it. Let's transition to the cybersecurity bridge. How do we get from the present to the future? One thing I'm concerned about is skill sets, and that is more AI in the environment, bigger attack surface, new types of attacks. Are we ready?
I think that there's benefits happening already for sure in this transition, and one of the key things that's certainly helping a lot of mid-sized organizations is taking a platform approach, right? So how can you link some of the things that you're doing, instead of linking them at the SIM level, which still requires a lot of effort, a lot of detection engineering, these kinds of things, leveraging a platform that is doing exposure management and XDR, and there's a number of those out there. that leverages AI behind the scenes so that it has visibility of the whole environment, and then it's providing useful recommendations, advice, and increasingly automation. So that is, and the whole reason that's being done is because organizations don't have enough time. They don't have enough time to deal with figuring everything out from all their different silos and bringing it together in Excel or in the SIM or whatever and trying to plan their day. So a platform approach really is very powerful for most organizations outside the super large ones.
Well, let me turn that question on its head, and that is Trend Micro, big international company. You are investing in AI, obviously, in your products. You have to protect your customers from some of the things they're doing with AI. What types of skills are you recruiting, maybe that you didn't have to recruit a few years ago, and how does that sort of reflect what your customers need?
Well, there's definitely a focus on AI literacy and AI skill in a wide variety of ways, right? I think many companies, including Trend, are now really encouraging employees to embrace AI, learning on a constant basis how AI is evolving, how it can help get various internal and external tasks done. So certainly we want people who are embracing that change in the infrastructure that's out there and embracing the potential of it. We certainly want people to do things with an appropriate level of care, and that helps us also inform what we need to be able to help customers with as they're deploying AI. There's a huge amount of interest in a lot of security teams right now, but what do I do about all this AI that's getting used, whether I like it or not? Some organizations are blocking it, but a lot of them are just sitting back, holy crap, gotta figure this out and gotta provide as much guidance as possible. So yeah, it's certainly an important frontier right now.
Yes, and I'm working with several people on that exact issue, and you really have to get in front of it. It's not something that's going to slow down at all. What about user behavior? So this is not something I think of Trend necessarily on, but will there be a need to kind of merge user behavior? And I don't mean like UEBA, but I mean just training users for good hygiene. Does that merge with EDR?
Well, and let's zoom out to XDR as well. I think there's a lot of well-intentioned efforts to help empower users and enable users. And at the same time, I do sit and ask myself, okay, if we're all, as the vendor community, trying to train users, hey, here's what you should have recognized in this email that it should have told you that it was a phishing email. Well, then why didn't the software do that, right? There's, I think, way too much tendency to blame the end user and not enough on how are we going to fix that in the software layer. How can we better detect phishing? How can we better detect other types of social engineering? How do we enable employees to do their jobs without having this level of worry? What I will say is there's one place where enablement is really working right now, and that's around some of the other types of social engineering like deepfake audio and video calls and so on, where just making people aware that's a thing and teaching them that they're able to say no to an executive on a video call is important.
Yes,
So that's one of the next horizons for EDR is trying to hook into video call programs and help assess if things are, if video calls are legit, if they're deep fakes. You know, can I figure out if I'm really talking to John Oldsick right now, or if you're just AI?
that's a really interesting development because that is, I mean, that expands the endpoint security definition, and it then definitely crosses over to that training area. So one of the things that I'm worried about is that, I mean, there's a lot of innovation, as you can see, in AI, and I think we will see some usurping of markets. just like we saw, if you think of Palo Alto with the next gen firewall, that kind of usurped some serious players in that space. However, with the use of AI, there's going to be some shoddy coding, biased models, and maybe some really poor actions. Does that concern trend? And like, what do you see as something like that happens? What do you see that doing to the market?
Well, I think everybody who is investing heavily in AI right now is doing so with a level of care. We're certainly doing it with a tremendous level of care, building a lot of systems for AI.
I know you are, Eric. I'm concerned that everybody is not, but go ahead.
Well, we're absolutely going to hit speed bumps in every industry, not just in cybersecurity, where there's going to be some news story somewhere about AI having done something wacky, which always comes down to, well, how was the model trained? How was it implemented? How was the AppSec done? I think this is an opportunity for the cybersecurity industry to up their game and to help the various sectors in the market with their AppSec, because so much of this comes down to application security and data governance, right? How are you securing your AI models? How are you avoiding introduction of really, really new types of vulnerabilities into applications that are AI powered? That's the forefront right now, and I think the cybersecurity companies can help with that problem beyond just our own industry.
What do you think of specific regulations around AI, and how does that impact trend?
I mean, we operate in numerous countries globally, so we obviously keep an eye on that to make sure that we're in compliance. That being said, I think it's very early days with respect to what governments are going to do in this area. I think that it's an opportunity for Trend to help organizations get in compliance, because we can help assess their AI applications, which are more likely to be problematic when they've got, developers just building in-house applications and not at a commercial grade level. It's like, how can we help with keeping the AppSec quality high so that they're not facing challenges with compliance with government or embarrassments? But yeah, I think governments are going to be scrambling to catch up to what companies like Anthropic and OpenAI are doing for, let alone cybersecurity companies, for the foreseeable future.
And real quickly, because we're almost out of time, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about, or at least give you the opportunity to talk about what you're doing with NVIDIA. So if you can just give me just 30 seconds on that.
Yeah, we're working really closely with NVIDIA in various parts of the world, leveraging their technology, but also building a lot of capability that interlinks with the tooling that they're building, so that fundamentally we can protect our customers when they are innovating with NVIDIA to build AI applications. So we have a deep understanding of the various layers of NVIDIA's architecture, and we're able to secure those in a variety of ways. Again, speaking to the kind of AppSec stuff that we talk about proactively, but also on an ongoing detection basis. So a close working relationship with the NVIDIA technical team on ensuring that as companies build NVIDIA applications, they're doing so securely.
Great. Thank you for that. And my last question, I promise, and I ask every guest the same question, and that is, what's the one takeaway that the audience should take away, I guess, from our conversations, and what should they be prepared for over the next few years with EDR, XDR in the Trend kind of universe?
Beyond, I think, the platformization approach that I think is accelerating rapidly, that people certainly need to be looking at. The most impactful thing that we see right now that people can do to avoid incidents is to put more emphasis on proactive technologies, on the assessment of exposure, on understanding where the risks are so that they can mitigate those in advance of the attackers. Because AI is helping attackers move faster. What you want to be using is AI-powered exposure management so that you get your environment cleaned up So you slow down the attackers, you make it really, really hard for them. And it's, I think, the most important thing going on in cybersecurity right now.
Well, Eric, I appreciate it. Congratulations on getting the cybersecurity trivia question right. You're in rare company, rarefied air.
So good, yeah.
But it was great. You got it. But again, thank you for participating and enlightening our audience about some EDR facts and EDR and XDR futures. So thanks again.
I enjoyed the conversation. Thanks for having me.
My pleasure to have you as a guest. Maybe we'll do it again. But in the meantime, everyone, please stay tuned in 2 weeks for another version of the Cybersecurity Bridge.